Welcome to Voice for Infection Prevention, where we explore the latest developments, challenges, and insights in the field of infection prevention and control. With a passion for promoting patient safety and healthcare excellence, we're excited to bring you engaging discussions with experts, leaders, and innovators in the field. So whether you're a seasoned professional or just beginning your journey in infection prevention, welcome to the conversation. This is Voice for Infection Prevention.
Welcome back to Voice for Infection Prevention. Today I'm talking with Tawanna McInnis-Cole, whose career journey is a testament to adaptability, leadership, and passion for patient safety. Tawanna's entry into infection prevention was unexpected. She applied for a nurse educator role, but found herself stepping into infection control instead. She quickly embraced the field, realizing it was the perfect blend of science, patient care, and education. In this interview, she shares how her background in med-surg, women's health, and emergency care shaped her approach, why relationship building and mentorship are essential, and how earning her CIC and a doctorate in healthcare administration helped her advocate for staffing, resources, and infection prevention leadership. If you're looking for insights on career growth, leadership, and making an impact in infection prevention, this is one you'll want to listen to. Let's get started.
This episode is sponsored by Clutch Recruitment, the leading recruiting firm in the country, recruiting exclusively within infection prevention and control.
All right, first question, and I asked this to really everybody so far, but how in the world did you discover the world of infection prevention?
That's a good question. Actually, I will say this. So I'm a nurse by background. I've been a nurse for 23 years now. And how I discovered infection prevention, I had just completed my master's degree in medical science. And so I was looking for something that could balance both. Not directly responsible for patients, but also not responsible as a manager of a patient care unit. And so, oddly enough, when I saw what I thought was an nurse education position posted, I applied for that and I interviewed. It was titled as Education Resource Specialist, but it was only until I got into the interview that they started to talk about infection prevention. And I actually had not heard of it. It's not something that is typically taught in nursing school. In fact, the one thing that I remember about infection prevention or infection control at that time being taught in nursing school is that there is a person, what was said to me is there is a person that's at the hospital that will report the communicable disease. Never gave it a name, never gave it a title, but once I start to learn more in that interview what infection control was, that is what was brought back to my memory. Oh, this is the person that reports the communicable diseases. To be quite honest, I had no idea what it was, but I was honest in the interview that this was something that I didn't expect. However, I would like to learn more about it, and so they did. At that time, they gave me resources and they gave me information and websites that I could look up. Particularly APIC, CDC, that sort of thing, for me to go and do some research. And then the more and more I dug into it, I thought this might be exactly what I'm looking for. Because again, I didn't want to be completely responsible for patients, but I also was not ready to be a nurse unit manager at that time anyway. And so it did merge the two of my passions together, because I also have a degree in biology as well. So it merged biology, it merged my nursing degree, and then also at that time medical science. And so it combined all three of them together and brought me to this place. It does tickle the fancy of all three of my passions. And so in 2006 is actually when I started, and I haven't looked back.
So I am curious. So this is back early 2000s. Were you working in a hospital as a nurse?
I was, yeah. Okay. So I worked nursing from 2001 to 2006. And so the first 2 years I did medical surgical nursing. And then the next 2 years I did women and children's. nursing. So that's labor and delivery, pediatrics, postpartum, that sort of thing. And then for the next 2 years, I did ER fast track. I was also completing my master's degree at the same time. So I wasn't full time at that time. I was part time nursing, but working in the ER. And fast track is primarily considered like an urgent care, but within an emergency room. So,
Gotcha. Okay. So then I'm curious, what was your experience with infection prevention while you were a nurse? I mean, was the infection prevention department like very engaged with what you were doing? Were you aware of their jobs, or like what was your interaction with them as a nurse?
in full transparency, the entire 6 years of nursing, I never saw an infection preventionist. What it looked like probably from 2001 to 2006, it looks totally different now from the early 2000s, but I didn't in the institutions that I worked in. If there was interaction, it was likely communicated from like the nurse manager, from the infection preventionist to the nurse manager, then to us. But to have seen the person face to face, I didn't have that opportunity. And so I didn't
Gotcha.
know anything about it until I haphazardly in the interview discovered it. And what I like to tell people is that infection prevention is a field that is discovered. It's not announced. They don't talk a lot about it in nursing school. And then a lot of my employees that are masters in public health, they have epidemiology courses and they have infection prevention exposure, but it's not a clear cut course of here's what that role does and here's the responsibilities that that role has. And so that's a little cliche that I've developed, that infection prevention is a field that is discovered. And that's not like a big
Yeah.
billboard that says come and work in this career because it's the best one ever. But we literally have to be the walking billboard to help people understand and know the importance of our job.
So, and tell me this. So, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but now in your role, what have you done, or I guess how have you made sure that, I mean, nurses like yourself are aware of infection prevention and the importance of it? I mean, I talk to hiring managers, I mean, every day, and it sounds like one of the big things that they want is for just the infection prevention department to be present and to have relationships and be on the floor. Is that a goal of yours? Is that something you've sought to change? And then also, do you think that's more the industry at that time, or do you think that was more just your personal experience and kind of how where you were operated at the time?
So I do think I'll answer the latter question first. So I do think that it was more of the scope of the career at that time when I was a nurse, because it again, when CMS and value-based purchasing started to put more weight on facilities as related to infection prevention practices, it skyrocketed the career to the forefront. The position was always there. It was always important to have, and definitely built into like accreditation practices. But again, it was different regulatory agencies that, of course, understood the importance of infection prevention that started to require facilities and organizations to clearly outline the authoritative figure as far as infection prevention practices, and then how well indoctrinated the infection prevention programs are in their campuses. Those are things that accrediting bodies and regulatory agencies started to assess for. And that's what, again, created the urgency and the impetus behind the career being such in the forefront as it is today. But for me to be able to ensure that the infection preventionists that I work closely with are able to be seen, to, are out there on the floors, like their tasks and their responsibilities are built for them to not be behind the desk. A lot of the work, of course, is epidemiologically based, where there's data, there's analysis and things that they have to do. But in order to have the true impact real time and in person, it is important for them to be there, to, be side by side with the nurse as he or she is caring for the patient. So that way, if there are things that they can see that may be daily routine for the nurse, but because I'm that second or third eye that's there with you, helping you make sure that you understand what's needed to prevent the bloodstream infections or urinary tract infections or any type of surgical site infection. I can be that second set or third set of eyes to help you in that process. But being visible having built relationships, that's critical for me. That's one of the things that I very often talk to my staff about, is relationship building is the most important piece to getting the clinical staff to be able to understand what it is that we need for them to do, and then what the evidence-based practice is. And the importance of that is to build a relationship first, so when you do need or when you do have an ask of them, you already have that personal and that professional relationship with them. And so they're more amenable to understand where it is that you're coming from, because they know that you not only have their best interests at heart, but you're, as an infection prevention, is also concerned about patient safety. And so, like I said, for me, the important thing is making sure that the infection prevention team members are out there, the staff see them, they know them, they trust them, and they feel that they are part of the team in helping to advance patient safety.
Gotcha. And then, so you, like you mentioned, you kind of fell into the job and kind of went into an interview process, not really knowing what you got into. Clearly you liked what you heard on the interview process though, and you felt like it could make an impact. I'm curious though, on the more the practical side and the financial side, did it make sense for you to step into that role at the time? Or were you like, no, I think this is going to be a new career for me, I'm willing to kind of take a step back and pay to work your way up? Or kind of talk me through that decision-making process.
So it did. Actually, it made financial sense and it made professional career development sense for me at the time, because as I was describing, I, again, had just completed my master's degree. And looking for that, I was looking for the opportunity to still be somewhat clinical, but then also have some sort of administrative responsibilities as well. And that's what infection prevention offered. So I didn't have to have a patient load 12 hours. I wasn't working like a 12-hour shift, 7P to 7A, like a routine nurse would. But at the same time, I was still making an impact on the care of the patient. That's how I processed it in my mind. And it, again, if I could be completely transparent, the job, when I applied for it back in 2006, it was labeled education resource specialist. But the point was, they wanted to hire a nurse at that time. And in order to label it, in order to have the salary that they wanted to have to make it attractive for a person to apply for the position, that's why it was labeled as such. I'm not upset about that at all, because it's what it grabbed my attention, and it definitely made me take a second look at it. But then again, like I said, when I discovered what it actually was, I thought it was a very neat opportunity, and I've been here for 18 years.
Okay. And that's not totally uncommon. I've had a lot of clients end up having to change the title purely for the salary to reflect what's fair compared to national averages. So it's interesting that was happening back then too. Yeah. But you walked in, essentially it was a staff IP role, I guess is what the position was. How did you have a team you were working with, and then who were you reporting to at the time?
I did. So when I first hired on, there was a team. It was an individual that was already there, and then they were looking to have 2 infection preventionists at the campus at that time. So I would be the second infection preventionist, and then the reporting structure was that the 2 IPs reported to the quality director, and then the quality director reported to the chief medical officer.
Okay, so even though you had a staff title, with there not being a manager in infection prevention, you kind of, I assume, handled some of that responsibility management-wise?
So there wasn't a manager at that time when I hired on. It was the 2 staff positions, and then we reported directly to the quality director. There was a quality manager, but we reported to the director.
Gotcha. Yeah, and just to clarify, I'm assuming since there wasn't an infection prevention leadership position, you had to essentially take on some of those responsibilities.
Oh, for sure.
Now in an IP manager.
Yeah. And so even in discussions about the role and responsibility of the infection preventionist, you literally managed the program. And so that was part of the responsibility as the staff that worked in infection prevention that was really, kind of shared with us and told to us that, it definitely is, it's not a manager position, but the responsibilities that you have are very much, of an administrative point of view, because there's process improvement that you have to serve as leadership for, gathering stakeholders in order to improve a process that you may feel needs some help. And those are things that are managerial responsibilities. And so literally the responsibility, again, we had to take some ownership and some leadership in order to be able to move the needle on certain HAIs or certain processes that we knew required improvement.
And I'm sure some of the recommendations on staffing have changed since then, but out of curiosity, how many, she said you had 2 people, how big of a facility was that you were at?
Yeah, it was licensed for 400 beds. And so we were moving with skates on every day, but throughout that time, we definitely had to build those relationships and establish those stakeholders, so that way places that we couldn't be all the time, we had other individuals who were passionate about patient safety that, we developed our relationships. And so in the times where we weren't rounding or couldn't be on their units, then we knew that there was someone else, not infection preventionists, but they were staff members, and they had sort of the same kind of passions that we had, and so they would look out for things, and then call us, hey, on the phone, hey, I need you to come and look at this. I don't think this is right, but as an infection preventionist, I think you probably should come and take a look at it. And so that was very helpful, and that goes back to my original point, that why relationship building is important, because you instill into not only those that you develop those relationships with, but those that you're around, those that see you and understand the work that you do, they start to lean and depend on you to help them throughout their careers and throughout their discipline and their departments in order to create patient safety there as well.
Gotcha. And then when you first stepped into the role, so you were told what the position would be. Obviously, an infection prevention is always changing, and there's always new things to learn. But was there anything like in your first 3 to 6 months where you were working as an IP, where you were like, I just didn't know this was going to be part of my job? Or was there something you were exposed to that was just like a complete surprise to you that it fell under your job description?
That is an amazing question, simply because I can reflect back in 2006. There were times when I was very early in the career, I had to take a pause and say, what did I get myself into? It was so big, it was so broad. Every single discipline in healthcare, infection prevention touches every single discipline. And so we had to know enough about every discipline's role and their responsibilities in order to be able to have a intelligent conversation with them about their specific job and how do I help them infuse infection prevention practices in their role. And so I couldn't talk ICU to a med-surg nurse, right? I had to know enough about ICU to talk ICU language, terminology, patient care, and then let's talk about how do I make sure that we're doing the right thing as far as infection prevention is concerned with the ICU patients. And then when I needed to, let's go to a different department. When I needed to talk to my environmental service staff, I couldn't talk ICU language and terminology. I had to know what matters to my environmental service staff in order to be able to have fruitful conversations with them about infection prevention expectations. And then thinking about the chief officers of the organizations, I had to know enough about what's important to them. So then when I'm talking to them, when I'm requesting things, having them understand why financially we need this, what is going to be the impact, what's going to be the lift to make it happen, those sort of things. And so it causes an infection preventionist, and this is another terminology that I use, we have to be chameleons. So we have to change faces to face the person that we are speaking to, so that way they understand what it is that we need them to do and they understand it in their language, because infection prevention is a language all of its own. ICU is a language all of its own. Rehab is a language all of its own. Neonatal intensive care, all of these different disciplines are different and they have different expectations, but there's one focal piece of it. All of them take care of patients, and then from the infection prevention standpoint, we have to be able to help them understand what they need to do to prevent patients from getting an infection, whether it could be something that's intrinsic or something environmental. So how do we help put measures in place to prevent those patients from getting infections that they didn't have before they came to the facility? And I can't talk apples to oranges. I have to talk orange to an orange and apple to an apple in order to make sure that we're getting the point across, and then they understand what it is that we need them to do. That's a big responsibility that causes you to study those roles. It causes you to have to be able to understand, know, and digest it. And then on top of that, develop those relationships in order to be able to get them to do what it is that you need them to do.
I think this will be a quick question, but is there anybody at the hospital that knows more about everything in the hospital than an infection preventionist?
Because I think I will be biased in my answer with that, and I'm going to say no. Because there is no discipline that an infection preventionist does not touch. Every single person that has a role or responsibility in the hospital, there is something that they must and have to do in order to implement infection prevention practices. And so again, there's not one single discipline that I can not think of that we have not had to sit down, have conversations with, or help them develop policies that, have infection prevention practices in them. There's another cliche: infection prevention is everybody's business, and it truly is. Every discipline that exists has some detail of infection prevention in their work.
And then, so you were doing this for a few years, and then we'll talk about your what looks like a promotion here in a second. But when did you get certified, and what was kind of the motivation behind it? And do you see a purpose in it, or just explain the certification and the value of that?
So I'll say this. So I started in 2006. I didn't get certified until 2011. And so I was a little bit of a slow grower. There are some people that, within 24 to 36 months, then they're working on their certification. It took me a little bit. And a lot of it was just the push, the motivation, because it's such a big field. It's such a broad field. I personally felt like there was so much for me to learn that I just wasn't ready to go for the certification. And then I also said to myself, you only got one shot. I wanted to do it on the first try, and I didn't want to have to, retake the test if things didn't work out for me. So I just made sure that I took my time and I was fully prepared before I actually went to go and sit for the exam. And then to prepare myself, I actually took some courses at the National APIC conference. They do offer, prior to the conference, they offer study sessions or prep courses. And so in 2011, I did take those courses for the 2 days that they offered them. And then that study material, then I had books, the study books, and then I also formed a study group to where myself and another individual who was interested in taking the test at the same time that I was going to take it in 2011, we just started quizzing each other because we did find that it did add a level of confidence. It added also a level of networking, because at that point too, when you do become certified, then it opens up a whole new world of different individuals that you could interact with, because they are also certified as well. And so the importance of it, because it is also a stamp of approval for your organization as well, when they can say, we have this many infection preventionists on our team and 90% of them are certified. That's a great accolade for an organization to have. But then also, again, that level of confidence to know that the individuals that you're working with at your campus, it adds a level of confidence to them, because they know that you're coming with information that you studied long enough to where you are considered an expert resource in the field. And so I definitely highly encourage anyone who's been in the field long enough to use the tools and resources that are available to make sure that you obtain that certification.
Yeah, no, that's great. And now, and I'm going off of titles on your LinkedIn here, so you can correct me if something's off here. But it looks like after about 5 or 6 years, you jumped from essentially a staff level role up to a regional manager position. Was that the true progression? Was that?
Yeah. So what happened is understanding, remember in our earlier conversation, there wasn't manager level positions available. And so there was quite a few that worked within my system that, had rising stars in infection prevention. And I was definitely considered one of those rising stars. And not by myself. There was a couple of my colleagues that, we worked well together. We were leading our organization as far as infection prevention was concerned. We all worked at different facilities within the organization, but many of our system leaders saw, that leadership capability within us, and saw that, we were not only helping our own facility do great work, but we would help each other's facility do great work. And so what happened is in 2012, that's actually when I took the regional manager position, there was a restructuring of the entire quality, patient safety, and infection control department. And so when that restructuring happened, then manager positions were created. And so, of course, as with any new position that's created, we had to apply for the different roles and go through different interviews, that sort of thing. And so I was fortunate enough to be granted the regional manager position in 2012 and just continued to grow. At that point in time, I had 4 hospitals under my belt. And even during that tenure from 2012 to 2017, it was 4. But my facility where I live, it's a growing and booming city. So my organization even built another hospital. And so from 2012 to 2017, I started out with 4, but ended up with 5 hospitals that I was actually responsible for as the regional manager for those campuses. There were infection preventionists in the campuses, but from a leadership perspective, I was the manager for the IPs that worked in those campuses.
Gotcha. Okay. So that is a big, I imagine that's a significant change between single hospital, another IP you're sharing work with, up to managing 4 and then increasing to 5 hospitals. So talk to me about that transition. One, how many people did you have reporting to you when you first moved into that new role? I just want to understand the scope. I mean, it's just such a big jump. So I want to hear how many people you're actually over, how many beds those 4 or 5 hospitals had, and then also how much did your day-to-day job change?
Oh, it changed a lot. It changed a lot. I will say this though, I think the work that I was doing before by, looking for other ways that I could help my colleagues at other facilities, kind of really helped make the transition not so tough, because I was already, just offering, like, can I help you? What is it that you need help with? Whether it was come and help me do some audits at my campus, or come and help me put this line list of patient data together and see what trending, you can see in it. And at the same time, also managing my own workload at the campus where I worked. And so because I was doing some of that before the whole restructuring and before the manager position was created, it wasn't as tough, but it wasn't easy. But I just can be completely transparent with that. Where I live is a very large metropolitan city. And so driving became the norm. Driving between those 4 campuses did become part of my routine day. The way that I would organize my day is based upon what meetings my staff had at their campuses. I would prioritize whether those are meetings that I should be at, or should I be prepping them the day before, so that way they could manage the meeting on their own. And then it also depends on the experience of the IP as well. If you have newer IPs, you definitely want, as a leader, you want to make sure that you're giving them everything that they need to be successful. And then there are times where you literally would need to be with them to allow them to do the work, but just to serve as a reassuring voice sitting in the meeting with them. So that way, they are articulating things correctly. And if there are questions that are asked that are a little difficult for them to answer, as a leader being there with them, helped them grow, and then it added, that same level of confidence to them as an infection preventionist. It was a total of six team members that I became responsible for. And again, thinking about 16 members, that's six different personalities, six different skill sets, six different levels of understanding of what infection prevention is and was at that time for them. And so really knowing each one of them to know, how do I best serve them as their leader, meet them where they are, meet their need. There's one or two of them that were already certified, and they didn't require a lot of me because they were already skilled. But then of course there are others that I had that were brand new to the role, so I had to spend more time with them in order to help them understand what it is that they actually were supposed to be doing. And then there are others that, had a medium level of experience, like 3 or 4 years, where I could help them, like maybe over the phone, talk through complex issues, or if you send me the Excel spreadsheet, then I can take a look at it, give you some feedback, and then they would take it and run with it, that sort of thing. And so it definitely was important for me to assess skill sets and assess, responsibilities and things that they could do independently, but then understand and know the things that they needed me to be able to support them. And so that helped me organize my day every day. But I can say that I enjoyed it because I'm a people person too. So I like to interact with people. And then what I used to always say to them, what excited me or what made me happy during all of my interactions with them, is when they had their light bulb moments. And so when we were talking through things and I would show them things and they'll be like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. That's what gave me joy. That's what gave me joy in all of my interactions with them. And because it said to me that I did something that made their day, and then now they're going to go do something that makes someone else's day. And so the joy that it brought to me by helping them understand literally what they're supposed to be doing, how to do it, and then how to go and make that impact on patient care with the staff that they're interacting with. I knew that they were going to go and approach it from, an amenable standpoint. And then here's how I can help make that staff or get that staff to understand what it is that we need for them to do. And in turn, the patient wins. And so it was a challenge, but I embraced it every day.
And then did you feel like you had to really hone in or like focus on a management skill set? And where that question comes from, there's folks like Chaz Roan in Florida that's really kind of big on this, and kind of how you talked about really learning every aspect of infection prevention. It feels like people have the tendency to really spend a lot of their time learning like the technical pieces of infection prevention and learning all the things. And I feel like management skills and that skill set can be kind of pushed to the side for a second and just not the focus. And then like yourself, you're kind of put into this management position and you haven't really, you did because you're managing a program, but now I assume you're meeting with more of the higher level leaders across the system as opposed to before. So did you feel like you were lacking in the management skill set when you first jumped in? And then, and what have you done or what would you recommend people do to really focus in on the management skill set?
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, that is reality because in infection prevention, we learn the content, we learn we're supposed to be doing in the role. And it's not that a lot of management courses are built into how to be an infection preventionist, because you're learning more of the content. But I knew that was missing in the infection prevention program, and I also knew that I wanted, even as a staff IP, I knew that I wanted to be more than just a staff infection preventionist. And so it actually was a personal investment for me. I will say this, that in my institution, during the time when I was a staff infection preventionist, there were opportunities for like charge nurse trainings where they offered leadership type courses. There was titled like building agile teams, that sort of thing. And they were really literally offered for charge nurses. But because I had an interest in it and I knew that it was teaching leadership responsibilities and, how to be a servant leader, then I took advantage of those. I attended quite a few of those courses, again, just to, build my leadership skill set, because I knew at some point in life I wanted to be, more than just a staff infection preventionist. Managing a program is one thing, but managing people is totally different. And so, again, those courses they laid the foundation for me to understand what it is to be a manager that truly can lead people and lead people effectively. But I will say this, that you never stop learning, particularly from a leadership perspective. I think that that should be an important thought process that leaders should hold fast in their minds, that you never stop learning, because people, just like healthcare changes, people change, the world changes, the expectations of individuals change. And then not only that, look at where we are. We're managing multiple generations at one time. And so we also have to be able to understand the particular expectations of the different generations, and how do I manage them. It's like a kid. You can't treat every kid the same, so you can't treat every employee the same. And then you have to understand, the cultures that are also infused, because United States of America is a multicultural nation, and so we even have to take things like that into consideration as well. Not just age, but considering all of the equity, diversity, and inclusion factors, the social determinants of health. Even in our own staff, we have to consider those things in order to make sure, as a leader, you are managing your people appropriately. And so, my advice: never stop learning.
And I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it looks like you progress. I mean, from that role, you got a director and the system director, and then now you've got the system, or I guess you got a system director title now. So, one, awesome, because there's not too many people that are able to advance in their career without relocating across the country, because there's a limited number of infection prevention roles, there's a limited number of hospitals. So to progress is in the same spot is difficult. So I want to hear, I guess, how that worked. Was did people leave and then they saw an opening and then like applied and got the job, or did the importance of infection prevention in the health system just keep increasing and they just keep adding to your roles, or did you have to fight for titles and promotions? Or just tell me how you kind of progressed up the ladder, at least in title.
Yeah. So even when I was a staff IP and then moved into the manager position, the director of infection prevention was a consulting director. Like, we never had a full-time director the entire time from 2006 to 2017. We did not have a full-time director we did not have a director that was a full-time employee of my organization. It was always, and it was the same person. So it was just a contract that was held for all those years, where the individual served as the consulting director for the organization for infection prevention. And so we did have another layer, where we did have another, at some point during that time frame, there was a director that took a position, but the consulting director still remained. At that point, they retitled it to enterprise director. And
Gotcha.
So we still had like the assistant director, but we also was the enterprise director, and that person still had oversight to the entire infection prevention program. And so that whole enterprise director shift came in 2012 when I became a manager, and then we also had the director level that was there. So that individual and I worked very closely together, but then eventually, to your point, decided that something else was in favor for them with their career, which then left all those regional managers with that consulting enterprise director. And we stayed in that organizational structure for quite some time, until there was conversation about, when do we end this contract? Because in full transparency, it started out that it was supposed to be just a couple of months, and then it ended for years. It went on for years. The contract went on for years. And so and I think that was at the prompt of the contractor, to be honest. Like, at what point do we end this contract? You have some very capable individuals that are serving as managers, and then could, they eventually, report to someone else who could be their director, that sort of thing. Or the conversation also came up, do you create a full-time director position, and then just have people vie for it? And so the response was, eventually that contract would end, and then that position would become available as the system director. And so I took a chance. I was one of the
Yeah.
regional managers that was there. I felt like that I had done due diligence. I had done enough great work, and I had worked well with not just the individuals that I was responsible for within the region that I served as the manager for, but I also helped the other regions, their other staff members as well. So I wasn't a strange face to the infection preventions that were not in my region. Like, I was definitely willing to be able to provide whatever support that they needed, even whether it was even through their own manager or directly making contact with them, to be able to support them as well. And so it ended up that I was, first of all, one of the ones that had the loyalty and stayed with the organization for an extended period of time. And I think that may have played in my favor as well. Not only was I passionate about the work and continuing to do great work, but I also had loyalty to the organization to remain. Because you also have to understand, like we talked about, healthcare changes. Healthcare can be a roller coaster ride for an employee that works in healthcare. There are always highs and lows, and you have to, understand, like, do I stay when it's low and hope that the high comes really soon, or when the low point happens, then does the organization remove me, or do I remove myself? Like, it's always a thought process that we have in our mind, because as healthcare workers, we know that it's constantly and ever changing. But I did have a level of loyalty, because I've seen great things in the organization from the time that I started up until the time where the decision was made, do we need to have a full-time system director? And so, like I said, I think that may have played in my favor as well, the loyalty component behind it, but then also the work ethic that I have, and the product that I produce, and the people that I've helped build their skill into infection prevention demonstrated my passion and my leadership.
And then, so you've been in this, how long have you been in the system director role?
I've been in this role, in the system director role, since 2017.
2017. Okay.
Mhm.
So it looks like you went back to school and got your doctorate. So
I did.
now, and this is going to be kind of a silly question, but you're the highest level IP at this system, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So there's probably not a ton of upward mobility at this point, at least within the infection prevention career track. But you went back to school and you got your doctorate. So a lot of people go to school in order to get that promotion or get something. What was your motivation for going back to school and getting that doctorate degree? And has it helped you in your
Well,
job?
yeah, I'll say this. That was a personal journey. Because if I can be completely transparent, nursing was not my initial career choice. It wasn't.
Yeah.
I started even in undergrad with my biology degree with the intention of becoming a physician. And so even as a child growing up, like, I had said to myself that I wanted to be a doctor. And so after graduating from my first undergraduate degree in biology, I did not feel like I was ready to, for MCAT, for medical school or anything, but I knew that healthcare was still my passion. And so I said, what can I do next? And so that's how I landed with nursing, because I already had a bachelor's degree. And in order to get a bachelor's degree in nursing, because I already had one bachelor's degree, it was only a 2-year requirement, because a lot of the prerequisites for the biology degree were prerequisites for nursing. So I could go straight into the nursing curriculum after I finished my biology degree. And so 4 years to get the biology degree, and then another 2 years to get the bachelor's in nursing, because like I said, I knew I wanted to be in healthcare, but at the point in time when I finished biology, I wasn't mentally ready to, take on the whole rigmarole of medical school. And so after I finished my nursing degree, and then I worked in the field for a total of 4 years. And then I was like, okay, so I've been exposed to healthcare for 4 years. I think that's enough. I should be ready at that point in time. And so that's where my master's program came in. It was in medical science. And so it introduced me, and it was basically like a post-baccalaureate program, but it gave me a master's degree. And so it exposed me to sciences that you would learn in medical school.
Gotcha.
And even after I finished that and I started to explore, interview for medical school and sit in medical school classes, shadowing students and all of that, it still wasn't settled in my heart that I wasn't ready, because I just still was not overwhelmingly convinced that this is where I was supposed to be, even though as a child, I said to myself that I wanted to be a doctor. But once I finished my master's program, it was like, that's not for you. That's not where you're supposed to be. And so at least I said to myself, I still have nursing. So how do I advance, in nursing with this master's degree? And again, that's the whole cycle of how I discovered infection prevention. And so understanding that, infection prevention, like I said, it does require a level of leadership and a level of management. And then my progression from being a staff IP to the manager role, having leadership courses, and then interacting with chief medical officers, with chief operating officers, and even CEOs of the different organizations, the different facilities within my organization. All of that exposure said healthcare administration is where you're supposed to be. Now, I can say this. I was interacting with a nurse educator in one of the campuses, because like I said, infection preventionists have to talk to every single discipline, right? And so I was talking to her. I was like, my next move, I do think that I want to obtain a doctorate degree, but I'm just not quite sure what I should get it in. And believe it or not, she spoke into my life that day. She's like, have you ever heard of the healthcare administration? She's like, they have a doctorate degree in healthcare administration. And literally what you're doing is healthcare administration. She was like, that's something that you should think about. And I kind of listened, but didn't listen at the same time. But then that conversation never left my mind. And so in 2019 is when I actually applied for the program that I went to. In 2020 is when I actually started the program. But that conversation never left my mind. So I started doing research, like, what does a doctorate in healthcare administration offer? And it literally fit the bill for what I'm currently doing now. And it just it added more exposure to what I know CEOs, CMOs, and COOs are responsible for. It helped me to understand their decision-making process, because the courses so much exposed me to what those leaders have to think through. While yes, I'm only concerned about one discipline that I'm responsible for, infection prevention, right? And so when I would, say to the chief officers, here's what we need, here's why we need it, I used to always wonder, like, why does it take them so long? I made my budget case so clear to them. What is taking them so long to make the decision? Like, I couldn't be any more clearer with my ask, with my why, with my expenses, and here's how you're going to benefit from it. But the program that I attended, it allowed me to see it from a different lens. And so I have so much more of a perspective of when, requests are needed or an ask is made, all of the things that those executives have to consider and then balance, particularly because it's not just meeting the need of the infection preventionist, but how does it impact all of those other disciplines, and what as a chief officer do I need to make sure, as making sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed before I say yes to this request. That program very much gave me the insight that I needed in order to make sure that I can even further manage the infection prevention program that I'm responsible for. And it definitely was, like I said, a personal choice. but I gained so much more from it. I gained, the perspective of understanding the whole entire healthcare system beyond just making a request and trying to create, what's great for patient safety, but balance sheets and budgets and financial, returns, all those sorts of things were a part of the course in order to, again, make me a better leader and more well-rounded.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal answer. You've just got a perfect background for the infection prevention career, going biology and then back to nursing. So I think you're a particularly interesting person to ask this question to. But what is your ideal team of infection preventionists at a single hospital? I mean, is there a strong preference on all nurses? Do you want a diverse team with backgrounds, or what's your dream team when it comes to a department?
I love that question. And I talk about this all the time, like in the interview process. If I'm, when I have a position that I'm hiring for, this is one of the things that I talk about with any of the candidates is having a well-rounded team is so much more important than having team members from all the same academic background. And so currently the staff that I have, they're nurses, they're MPHs, and then I had lab personnel. There was one point that I even had a master's in human resources employee. So all of the different disciplines together, we can see things from the different lens of our academia background, but then also bring it together to one nice infection prevention product that we're producing when we're setting expectations for the individuals, the staff that are working in our facilities, in our healthcare system. And so it brings different perspectives. And I can say this, just kind of thinking through for my master's in public health team members, when they have to go into the patient's room and look at the devices, the central lines or the Foley catheters or the ventilators, or look at surgical sites, then that's a little bit something that's different for them because they weren't exposed to that. But I use my clinical staff, the RNs, to do teaching prior to us ever even exposing them to going in to see the patient. Let's talk about what this is. Where does that central line terminate? And, in that patient's right atrium, let's talk about why it's important to keep it clean, because look where it's ending. And then having them understand that clinical piece of it that they didn't get because they are masters in public health. And then reverse the role. My masters in public health, when we see, any trending that's happening, my epidemiology staff can put that line list together and then teach my clinical staff, here's how you put that together. Here's how you're supposed to look at that. And then here's where I see, when I'm looking at this spreadsheet, the trends that are noted very clearly when I put all these patients together. And then my microbiology team members, if there's a particular cluster of something going on, we use them to help us figure out where in the world is this bug coming from, right? So I'm seeing it on a couple of patients, like what could possibly be the index case and where did that person get it from? So having them understand the microbiology behind an organism helps us to understand what strategies we need to put in place in order to prevent it from spreading. And so having all those disciplines work together, because the microbiologist can say, here's where it's coming from, and here's probably where we need to break the chain of transmission. And then my clinical staff can say, okay, well, here's how we're going to have them understand what they're supposed to be doing when this happens to the patient. Here's what they need to do to keep it clean. And here's how often they should be watching it or monitoring it. And then my epidemiology staff can say, well, this is how many patients have it. And so it looks like the cross transmission may have occurred at this particular moment because these patients were in this room, then they were in that room, and then that's probably where it happened. And so again, putting all those disciplines together is what helps make us, have a well-rounded team. And then that for me is what advances your program to, help. Again, the whole point is to always create and enhance the patient safety that you want for your organization.
No, it's another great answer. So is there a background that you would say better prepares you for an infection prevention job day one, or is it just different?
It's just different. It is so different. So a lot of people think that the nurse has the advantage. That's the clinical piece of it. That's the only advantage that I felt that I had as a nurse when I came into infection prevention. Because literally, when I entered the field, the first couple of months, I, if I can be just fully transparent, there are some nights that I like shed a few tears. I cried like, this is so hard. I think that I have literally met my match, and this one might break me, but I didn't quit though, because I had a lot of people surrounding me, as far as like my colleagues, my coworkers, and my own leaders within my organization, sharing things, showing me things, and then helping me understand again what it is that I was supposed to be doing. But the advantage from your academic background is a small piece to the puzzle of understanding what the full scope of the infection prevention job is. I think the absolute must is that you do have one of those backgrounds, microbiology or some sort of healthcare background, in order to be able to be successful in the role. But you also have to have a learning and a willing attitude, because no matter which background you come from, there's so much more to learn about the other pieces and parts of infection prevention in order to make that person a great infection preventionist. And so the only thing that I would say is that yes, having the background does help. It doesn't, to me, there's no advantage one way or the other, because the learning is what's going to be critical. If you don't have an open mind and you're not able to see it from the perspective of the other discipline, then I don't see that person being successful in infection prevention at all.
Yeah. And that leads me to my next and last question. You obviously been involved with a lot of hiring over the years. So I'm curious what it is that you look for in somebody that you hire. Like, are there any personality traits, or is there any skill sets, or is there anything that you really hone in on that you can just kind of spot and be like, okay, that will make a great IP?
Yeah. And so, for me, what makes a great infection prevention is I look for motivation. I look for accountability. I look for responsibility. I look for dedication, because I always tell candidates that I can teach the content, but I can't teach you how to get up out of the bed every day and want to come to work. Right? I can't teach you how to, when you say you're going to do something, then you follow through and you absolutely do that. Those are things that you have to come into the field already innately a part of your characteristic. When things are tough and you don't understand it, I can't teach you the dedication to keep pounding at it until you get it. Those are, again, those characteristics and traits that, frankly, mom and daddy had to teach you those things. But I can give you the content, the exposure, the knowledge, the resources that it requires to be successful in infection prevention. But those soft personal and innate skills, those are things that I assess for in every interview. Is this person capable? Is this person willing? And does this person want to do the job? Because again, I personally know how big the job is and everything that it requires. But if you have, those skill sets already embedded into you, then, you're able to understand what, again, the content is, what the expectations are, and then be able to function effectively as an infection preventionist, because you already have foundational skills that you came to me with that I assist for.
All right. That's all I've got. I mean, is there anything that either I didn't ask that you would have liked to have talked on, or any kind of closing statements you'd like to make just about the field or people interested in the field?
Yeah, I would say to anyone that is interested in the field, just keep pounding at it. It really is a great opportunity. I've had to I've gone through quite a few interviews where the candidates pool now is getting even harder to choose, because so many people are discovering it now. And if by chance, you do interview for one job and that one doesn't happen, then continue to push forward in it. There are organizations that you could become members of in order to also get that exposure, to make sure the one that it truly is the field that you want. Understanding too that it is a wide array of responsibility that the infection preventionist has. And so that willingness to want to learn all the things that all disciplines are responsible for, understanding and knowing that that is part of the job. Like, you're not just learning one particular thing. You're not learning one particular discipline of work. You're knowing that every discipline, infection prevention, has some sort of involvement in it. And so you're very active in the campus. And if that is part of your personality, if you do like that sort of a thing, that's what infection prevention offers. I also would encourage, just talking with other infection preventionists to have them share with you their own personal experiences and how they got into the role. But then being a part of organizations where the infection prevention career is promoted or even understood or discussed will also, kind of help make sure that you are making the right decision. Because one of the things that I do like to tell people too, it takes a while to even feel comfortable after you're hired. If I put the infection preventionist in a room full of people and there's conversations happening, it's not until maybe 18 to 24 months that you will confidently raise your hand and say, "Oh, I'm the infection preventionist. I can answer that." And the reason being is because there's so much to learn. It's very much, again, so many different disciplines that you interact with that it requires learning the whole entire time. And it takes a skill set to where you want to learn it, and then you pace yourself so that way you don't burn out trying to learn all the things that are so critical to infection prevention. But for me, when I first discovered it, I took a look at it. I dove head first into it, and I just haven't looked back. I've seen it evolve from the time that I discovered it in 2006 up until now into 2024. But the changes are critical. The changes are important. The changes are, for me, they are awesome changes in order to, again, make sure that we are doing the right things for our patient every single time. And so it is an important role. It has gained notoriety, particularly the pandemic. I thought that infection prevention was in the forefront, but the pandemic really pushed the career into the forefront. And so sometimes I wonder, should I be glad that a pandemic happened, or Lord, the pandemic wore us out sort of thing? But in any case, it helped if people did not know who their infection preventionist was prior to the pandemic, I can guarantee you they knew who that person was during the pandemic and even now afterwards. So Stick with it if someone is interested in it.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Voice for Infection Prevention. We hope you found our discussions informative and insightful. Remember to subscribe to our podcast for more conversations with experts in the field, and don't forget to leave us a review to let us know what you think. For additional resources and to stay updated on the latest news in infection prevention, visit our website at voiceforip.com. Thank you again for listening. Until next time, stay safe and continue your commitment to excellence in infection prevention.